Good morning, everybody. It's 11 o'clock, and I'm glad everyone's here on a Friday morning. And welcome, everybody. I'm Gina Collinsworth, and I'm here from Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, and we have quite a few people from our sister LDD, Buckeye Hills Regional Council. And we are so thrilled with the fact that Appalachia has just had a huge influx of grant dollars down here with the Appalachian Community Grant program, and those have been awarded, and everybody's excited to get started on their projects. And with our role, what we want to do is try to help you document and share in a communications lens, share all the good news around these projects, share the positives that are happening in your community, so that people in the community can follow along with the progress and feel like it's, take ownership of it. And it's pretty exciting to think about the historic impact of the program and some of the projects that are going on out there. So one of the good things is we have someone that's going to help us with documenting and publicizing and communicating with our communities around this program. We've never done this before, but we feel like it's pretty important to talk about this good news. And so we've enlisted Andie Walla, who is a instructor at the Ohio University in the media script school and the department over there. And we've worked with Andie in the past on a video that she did for all the local development districts that helped us showcase kind of an explainer video of what we do. Because if you work on an LDD or in an LDD, sometimes in the community, people don't understand exactly what our role is. So Andie and her students helped us to define what we're doing project-wise. So we went back to her and begged her, please help us, Andie, with this new great problem we have of talking about this Appalachian Community Grant program and sharing all of our, positive stories out in the community. So she's here today. I'm going to turn it over to her and she'll explain things better. But she's here today just for us to kind of pick her brain, ask questions. She's going to talk a little bit about the project that we have going with our documentary, and also talk about your role in the project. How can you help to make sure that your community has, all of the great publicity and can tell the good stories that you are going to have with this program. So Friday morning at 11:03, I'm going to turn it over to Andie. We won't keep you very long, but definitely we want to answer any questions you have. So it's very informal. And the chat, utilize the chat if you have questions, raise your hand or whatever. And Andie, you want to introduce yourself? And good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. As my role is primarily as a faculty member in the School of Media Arts and Studies, but I also am a practicing video producer. I think what I like best about my job is that I get to be a storyteller for people who don't have that voice, and to be able to use my special video skills to help tell the story with other people's words and visions. So with that kind of frame in mind, I've lived in Athens, Ohio for, gosh, almost 22 years now, so I'm pretty familiar with the area. I grew up in Cincinnati, so not too far away, on the east side on the border of Hamilton and Claremont counties. Ohio has been my home for most of my life, and I love telling stories that I know nothing about. So thank you all for being part of this experiment. I think the big thing we always think about is in terms of why do we use video, right? These are the big five things. We want to tell a story to someone. We want to document something. We want to educate someone. We want to persuade them, or just communicate whatever emotion it might be. So when we're thinking about using video, all of these items that you might be working with in your own community, always think back, am I telling a story? Am I documenting? Am I educating? Like, what is exactly my motive? And most likely it's going to fall into one of these categories. Okay. I think A lot of you have heard about video production, and I think the most common thing people hear of is B-roll. What's B-roll? A-roll, B-roll. So just to kind of talk a little bit through about these video elements, A-roll is going to be your talking heads, your interviews, right? It's kind of the meat and main focus of what the video is. And so, well, when my students come in, I'm really going to be focusing on interviews. You might capture an interview, out in the field as progress is being made before my students really start coming in the spring. But interviews are considered A-roll, and really kind of think about information coming from that A-roll. And then the B-roll is really complementing what is being said in that A-roll. So it could be a cutaway, it could be video, it could be photos, it could be illustrations. I think a lot of you are in the early stages of planning, and I'm sure everyone's has artist renderings, right? That can count as B-roll, okay? I can't tell you how many times we use screen recordings of a website, that can count as B-roll. A lot of the things that someone is explaining in the A-roll, you could visually show with B-roll, okay? So just to kind of explain the difference between A-roll and B-roll. Now, when you're capturing B-roll or interviews, you always want to record for at least 20 seconds. I'm sure some of you have a cell phone and you have captured video and photos before. When you're capturing video, recording for at least 20 seconds is important when you start thinking about the editing process. You can never have too much footage, especially as some of your projects are happening so quickly. Some things might only be there for like a day, and you can't go back to it and say, hey guys, can you pull that whatever construction item out? I didn't get a shot of it. So sometimes just thinking 20 seconds is every day, and as often as you cannot have too much, but you can't go back in time. So that's what you guys in the next few months can really do, help us out by capturing things that we're not there every day to see. Of course, some people think it's really important to have big fancy lights and fancy cameras, and these days it's really not necessary. The best lighting source, I think, for most of our projects is going to be existing lighting, right? We have the sunshine. So it's okay to not have fancy lighting and just be able to work with what you have in terms of lights. But shot composition is really important, and we'll talk a little bit about what that shot composition means here shortly. Visual background distractions. I can tell all sorts of silly stories about my career, but the big thing I want you to take away is when you're recording, make sure that there's nothing that people wouldn't want to publicly see happening in the background. I've seen people screaming at meter maids in Athens because they got a ticket in the background of a video shot. And it's just kind of distracting from what is happening, what you really want to be the story, what you really want to show someone, what you really want to document. So just kind of think about, okay, is there anything weird happening in the background? And sometimes it might just mean that you just physically have to move to a different spot. But obviously safety is important. I think a lot of your areas might have construction fences. Does that sound right? Probably. I'm not asking you to climb the construction fence or go around it. Sometimes it's just moving, even like a few feet to the left or the right might help you get a better shot. So paying attention to visual background distractions is important. And camera stabilization is really great. I think most of you are going to be using a cell phone. They make all sorts of accessories for your cell phone these days. You don't necessarily need it, but I just wanted you to be aware of it. And then we're going to talk about the rule of thirds and shot sizes and stuff here. And I'm just going to try to go through this really quick so we have plenty of time to address. Gina has a copy of this presentation. We can email it to you if you'd like to review it. I think the biggest thing when you're out in the field, especially, I'm sure many of you maybe do social media. If you're focusing on social media content, shooting horizontal, shooting vertically is pretty common. Like if you're making a TikTok and you want to use the whole frame, Now, I think we all know that mostly video is like this. So, because really what we're hoping to use a lot of the content that you guys are capturing into larger videos that we'll be able to use. You can still use social media content like this. And if you're like, I don't know, when in doubt, if you really want to record this way, you can, but then also try to record the same thing the other way too. Lots of options. Again, you can never have too much. So just try to keep that, use your phone horizontally when you're shooting video. I know TikTok's just ruined the world of that. So some of these optional cell phone accessories that are out there, and again, like sky is the limit. You can spend hundreds of dollars, or you can spend $30 at, Walmart and get something too that does a pretty good job. They make great little tripods for your cell phone. They make gimbal stabilizers that are a little bit more expensive, but it really makes a difference if you're doing a lot of handheld walking around taking video. Maybe there's a building that's being renovated and you're walking through the building. Sometimes looking into one of these accessories might be helpful. They make external camera lenses, microphones, sky is the limit, but just so you're aware that there are options out there to up your cell phone video capturing abilities. Which, yeah, sky is the limit. I've seen like $400 rigs for your camera, which is a little out of my budget, but shot variety. Shot variety is going to be crucial to creating content for your audience to really show detail. So the top box has different shot sizes. So a lot of things, people tend to just shoot wide shots or long shots, and meaning that they're just kind of showing a whole area, maybe a site, and that's fine. But really where you start to polish and create more content is when you show detail with either close-ups or extreme close-ups even. So sometimes, it might be something tiny over a period of time, but capturing the more detail will make your viewer feel more engaged. If it's just like the same wide shot over and over again, they're going to lose interest. So trying to get different shot sizes and different detail is really important, as well as angles. Maybe you're in a theater and there's a balcony second floor, and you could go up to a balcony and get a high angle. Don't be afraid to put your phone on the ground and get a low angle of something. There's all sorts of ways that you can, try to differentiate so it's not all long shot, wide shot, wide shot, and you can mix it up a little bit. So shot variety is super important in starting to capture content. Camera movements. I think for the most part, sometimes with your cell phone, it's really easy just to stand in one place, capture something for 20 seconds, and then be done. Depending on the content you're capturing, you might want to do what we call a, pan from left to right. Maybe it's a big wide area, you're in a room and you want to show something. Panning from left to right is really exciting to reveal something to your viewer. But I always think when you have a camera movement, you need to move way slower than you think you should. I know when I give my 5-year-old a cell phone, he's just like whipping it around like this, and it's really hard to see what's happening. So try to kind of keep your eye on what's happening on your screen as you're moving, and just move as slow as you think you can. And if you realize maybe that you're not great at camera movements, that's okay. It is a learned practice skill that's taken me decades to master. And so static shots are okay too. When you're capturing video, totally okay. But just kind of think about what your ability is. And, if you play back some clips and you're like, wow, that doesn't look too great, then just go do something else. You don't there's no reason to be married or try to, master something if you don't want to. So panning from left to right, maybe tilting up and down to reveal the height of something. These kind of camera movements also can be really engaging for your audience members. Okay, so give them a try, and I think you'll know pretty quickly if I've got it. I'm so close. So keep trying if you're into it. But if you're intimidated by a camera movement, don't worry about it. Just go back to that variety. Wides, mediums, close-ups. Now, I think we all know digital zoom. We all have digital zooms on our cell phones. I don't know if you've I don't have, I mean, I have a decent Samsung Galaxy phone, but sometimes when you digitally zoom in, it pixelates your image. So I always encourage you to try to zoom with your feet if it's safe to do so. Remember those construction fences? I'm not asking you to hop over the construction fence to get closer to something, but I do want you to try first to get closer to something if you safely can, because that's going to give you a higher quality image or video of the detail of you're trying to show. But if you do need to use your digital zoom, just kind of try to be smart about it and ask yourself, why am I doing this digital zoom? It looks kind of grainy. Is this going to be okay? And sometimes it's like, yes, it'll be fine. Sometimes no. But again, you can never have too much. And I'd rather you capture it and just let someone else make that decision than going back and saying, oh, we can't use this, or, oh, I deleted it, because that's the worst. The rule of thirds, I thought a cute puppy on a day like today would be good. The rule of thirds is a pretty standard photography, videography idea that you're breaking your screen up into 9 segments and that your subjects are really focused in where your the horizontal and vertical lines intersect. So try not to always have things centered. And always just kind of think about putting it slightly to the left or the right, just to kind of give it a little bit more artsy look. And again, we can manipulate these things in post-production a little bit while we're doing some editing. Like this next slide, you can see that the butterfly in the image on the left is in the center, but we've cropped it to adhere to the rule of thirds in the image on the right. So just kind of try to think about, your framing, not only the size of your shot, but the framing and the content, and, maybe that it's not smack dab in the center every time. We have this whole area of the screen and we want to make sure we're using it all in our viewer is not just locked into the center of the screen. So we're using the whole screen. Depth of field is something to consider. As you can see, the image on the top, kind of has this vanishing point from the bottom right screen where the table starts to the bottom, top left. So it's kind of going off into the distance. Construction fences are great for lines of sight. But also sometimes people start thinking about depth of field. Now, this might not be as important because mostly, honestly, if you're using a cell phone, this has a very deep depth of field, and you're not going to get the look like we have on the bottom of the image with the billiard balls, because you have to have a special lens to really achieve this depth of field, okay? And this is what we call a shallow depth of field. So maybe your office does have a DSLR camera and you're working with this, and you're not using your cell phone. This information might be more pertinent to you, but if you're using a cell phone, unless you're buying those external lenses, it's really hard to achieve this look. So just right next to each other. So you see on the left is the shallow depth of field. And I'm sure, you're like, oh yeah, I have seen that before, where that background is very blurry and your subject is really sharp and in focus. And then on the right is our deep depth of field. And again, most of our cell phones have a deep depth of field because of the lens that's built into our camera. I think sometimes there's effects that you can use on your images to blur the background. I think we have that built into things like Zoom and all that good stuff too, to create that false sense of a shallow depth of field. But that really is created with the lens that you're using on your camera. And again, if you are using a DSLR camera, you can also manipulate the depth of field by using the f-stop. And so this is just kind of an example. You can see with f8, we have a deeper depth of field. We can see more of the background. And when we get down to f2.8, the background is pretty shallow. So we can't see the lamp back there. So just kind of keep that in mind if you are using a digital camera and not your phone. So just some common do's and don'ts when you're capturing things, whether it be photos or videos. Get tons of variety. Even if there's like one thing happening, get 10 different shots of the same thing. You never know. You know, I think we all probably remember before digital cameras, if you were using film, like, okay, you only had 60 minutes on your tape, or you only had 24 shots on your roll of film. We can forget about conserving, right? You know, take as many things as, you know, many shots as you can, unless you're like me and I just had to delete a bunch of stuff from my Google Photos. It was getting too full, backed it up on my flash drive. But think about getting lots of variety, even if it's the same thing. Taking one picture or 20 seconds of video might not be enough. Just while you're there, take 10 different photos, get a wide, medium, close, and then go to a different angle, get a wide, medium, and close, move somewhere else. You'll never have, it's never a bad thing to have too much. Pay attention to those details. You know, maybe hopefully no one's breaking OSHA laws in the construction site and everyone's got their safety gear on or whatever it might be. But sometimes you just want to pay attention to details and make sure something's not happening in the background that might be alarming if you put out there on social media or gave to somebody else. Stabilize your shots. I think most of the time our cell phones are pretty light, so you can just hold it. You know, I use two hands when I'm shooting video on my phone. Sometimes I like to sit down or lean up against a wall. You can stabilize your whole body, and that's going to make you stabilize your shots if you don't have the funds to invest in some kind of fancy gimbal or tripod for your phone. Play back your video. Right? We have this great luxury of checking our content before we don't have to go wait to develop it or put it in a special machine. You can just sit, play it back, make sure it looks good. And if you didn't get it, try again. There's no rule. I mean, I guess unless your personal calendar is like, oh gosh, I only have 5 minutes to be here. But just take your time. And I think as you start to capture images with the projects, you'll start to get better at it. But practice, practice. But playing back your content to make sure it's there, or looking at your photos, don't assume that it worked, or that I think I've done this, guilty. I've missed some cute kid moments where I've been like, oh, I'm watching it through my phone and I'm like, oh, I wasn't recording. So always make sure that you're recording, that the numbers are moving, and play it back to assure that it's there. Try not to shoot vertically with your phone. There are ways to have an effect to make it fit the full screen in a video. I think digital zooming in video, it's just not that good. Like if you're pinching while you're recording, it's just never that smooth. Don't forget to get lots of different kinds of shots, and don't be afraid to shoot it again. I do that all the time. I'll have like the same shot like 5 or 6 times, and then I'll go back and look at them and then decide, oh yeah, they're all good, or no, I can delete these. Some of you might consider doing interviews with people while things are happening. And the great thing about our cell phones is they all have microphones, right? Take your time to set up a nicely composed shot. Make sure the person is close enough to the camera to get audio. You can hold your camera slightly off to the side and like talk to them. I think when you hold the camera here, they look right into the camera, and you just kind of want them to look slightly off to the side, so you can kind of try to frame it and hold it off to the side so you're still talking with them, and say, try to ignore the camera and just talk to me. Or enlist a friend, have a coworker come with you. Maybe when one person is holding the camera and dealing with that, and you're having a conversation with someone. I think breaking that fourth wall when you're looking into a camera can be kind of unnerving for a viewer. You always want to ask real obvious questions, like, where are we today and what's going on? And then they'll say, you want them to repeat the question and the answer, and they'll say, okay, well, today we're here at, the construction site of the future home of this, and, today they're putting in this and blah, blah, blah. So try to get as much detail and try not to like lead them in. Just ask really vague questions like, where are we and what's going on today? And let them tell their story. Because sometimes it can be really hard when you're doing an interview, because you know this background of the story, but it really helps in the editing process and to be a storyteller if you ask obvious questions and have the person repeat the question in their answer. Some people might be able to wear headphones with their cell phones. If you can, great. If not, maybe play it back before that person walks away to make sure it sounds okay. Because of course, construction sites, that beep, 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 we all know that noise. Sometimes construction sites can be a pretty noisy place, but sometimes that's part of the environment, and it's okay if we hear those things because you're at a construction site and we would expect to hear those noises. I always liked at the end of an interview, even if you're just asking them, where are we and what's going on today? What are next steps? Always ask this question. Is there anything else I didn't ask you that you want us to know at this point? That is such an important question, and it really gives the person you're interviewing this idea that they are telling their story, and they might tell you something that you have no idea about to ask. So when you ask that question, is there anything else I'd like to add? You know, that's really great. And of course, you know, just using available light. Like I have my little light in my office because I've got the window back here, but I have a little light. I'm sure most of you, COVID eras, you know, we have these available lights. You don't have to go out and buy some fancy light kit. I always ask people how to spell their name and what their title is while you're recording, so you have that information and it's just with the video file. Ask broad questions, take time to set it up and make sure it looks nice. Remember that rule of thirds. So like if I were being interviewed, I wouldn't want to be in the center of the screen. I would maybe want to be, oh, sorry, over here. Hi, I'm on this side. Or hi, I'm on this side. Be a silent listener. Eye contact, nodding, because if you say, guess what? You'll hear that all in the video clip. So don't be a verbal listener. I know, especially if you have a pen that clicks. That's another one people always do. But don't rush your interview. Your job is to make that person look good, and your job is to help tell their story. And I almost guarantee you, if you play it back and you're like, oh, can we please do that again? Most people would say, oh, sure. So make sure you're recording and that you're getting good audio. Background noise could ruin your video, but with B-roll, it's kind of great because natural sounds are awesome. I have my college students record a minimum of 2 minutes of natural sound when they're just on location, because sometimes that's really helpful in the edit to be able to get that. And I'm trying to think, that's about it. I think the big thing, I've included some other like technical information in case anyone wants to know if they have a DSLR camera, like talking about the exposure triangle and these different settings on a camera that affect your exposure and what they all are. Color temperature, I'm sure mostly our cell phones do it all for us, but color temperature can also have an effect if you're using a DSLR and it's not on an auto setting. But I think the biggest thing is always take extra batteries, make sure your phone's charged up when you go, you know, get an extra memory card if you have for your phone, or, you know, invest in some storage space. Here at the university, we use OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive. I know I think I have like 5 terabytes of space, which sounds like a lot, but it's not when it comes to video. But figure out where you're going to back up your files, because as soon as you capture them, back them up to somewhere. And, you know, maybe that's a shared drive that, you know, maybe Gina can help facilitate that or something, just so where everyone can start consolidating their footage. And you could use it for your own personal uses too, but it would be really great if my students could use it when they're starting to tell stories. Swivel chairs. If you're interviewing somebody inside, try not to have them sit in a swivel chair because they will swivel. It looks weird. And autofocus is great, but make sure things are in focus. I think we all are used to touching our phones and focusing it. Sometimes it doesn't work. So always double check things and make sure things are in focus. And sign release forms, which I think I gave Gina a copy of release forms. Normally the rule of thumb is if it's a public place and someone's willing to be on camera, like, then you don't need a release form. But I always, for best practices, when I'm interviewing someone, I have them sign a release form. But if, you know, there's a pedestrian walking through a B-roll shot on a public sidewalk, I wouldn't worry about that. And I wouldn't run to the construction site workers and say, I need you all to sign a release form, because probably most likely from where you are, you're probably not going to be able to identify them. And of course, I did want to include my email address if anybody wants to reach out, you know, and we don't have time today to address your questions, but it's walla@ohio.edu. I love helping people capture good videos and, help be a storyteller. But I guess just open up the, I know it's 11:30, but does anybody have any questions, or hopefully this was helpful to kind of talk through these things?
If anyone has a question, drop it in the chat or unmute and just jump in. But I was going to say our goal is two things. We want to do some smaller, like social media type videos, and we want to help you with editing those. The other is we do definitely want to have like an hour of a documentary, so a long form and short form. And we're here to help. And the reason we wanted you to know all these details about how to capture some of that footage, we definitely want to be here to help you with the editing.
Yes.
So, that if you can collect the info, we can help you shape it into the video final for you to push out on your social media, in your website, blog posts, however you want to use it. And also, I was going to say that my whole thing I was thinking about was we definitely could do social media. That's where this content could go. You could use it on your Facebook page, on Twitter, on YouTube. It could also be on your website. And then we want to use it in our documentary style final video that we're going to be putting out there. So I'll definitely follow up with some kind of shared location for you to drop video down to, and also some way to save it so we can identify the location. But I was thinking, Andie, some of the things that might be good to videotape for everybody out there would be ribbon cuttings. That I think would be a really great thing for you to get some footage of, even if it's a photo. It could be photos, it doesn't have to
Yes.
be video. But ribbon cuttings, and then how Andie mentioned some of that great footage of the site itself as it's being transformed, whatever your project is. Those are always good. And then I love the thought of the artist renderings. I think those would be the three main things, interviews as well. But if you have, and you're going to have some good opportunities for footage, let us know. And there may be an opportunity for us to come and film it for you. So,
Yes.
especially
And if
like
anybody
ribbon
is
cutting.
like, wow, I don't want to do any of this. Andie,
Yeah.
do you have any interns? I would love, depending on where you are, I love to give students opportunities. Either it's, if you have somebody doing marketing maybe, and you'd love for a student with expertise in photo or video to come work with your specific organization, I'm happy to help you try to find an intern, for next semester if needed. But again, I know this is probably a lot in a little short amount of time, but really, you are the people that are out in your own communities and capture everything. I mean, even at the ribbon cutting ceremonies, if you take photos, enlist a coworker, say, hey, you take pictures and I'll take the video, or, vice versa or whatever. You can't have too much. I cannot stress that. You cannot do too much. And time will pass quickly on your calendar. Maybe you just build in a time every week to go do a site visit and take pictures. Even if you don't think many things have been updated in the past week, just go and, say, okay, every week I'm going to capture 10 really great photos, or, 1 minute of video every week. It really will make a difference in the long run once my students are able to come and start capturing things in like February.
And, for your own community, I mean, you don't have to rely on us, even just like that idea of what Andie said. Once a week, maybe you go out and take a photo of the progress and you put that on Facebook with a couple of sentences of, the date and here's what we're doing this week or what's happened. I just think that our communities, they are aware of, some of the funding, and they are excited, and we can keep them excited about it if we keep them engaged with what's happening in progress and stuff. So, it definitely will be great at the end of in 2026, but even right now there are stories to tell about what you're doing and your work, and it keeps people excited. So
yeah, but happy to have any individual meetings or consultations with any of you about your specific project that's going on.
we're so lucky to have you, Andie, and your students. Thank you. I mean, this is an all volunteer project, so Everybody, thank you so much for joining if you need to jump off. But if you have questions, we're still here, happy to answer them.
Andy, thanks for all the information. Would you mind going over some tips for making editing like a short, seamless process? Because a lot of times I feel like I can get lost in trying to perfect that and spend way too much time there.
Right. I still do the same thing too, Dylan, if that makes you feel any better sometimes. So when you're editing your video, I know that there are great applications right on your cell phone to use to be able to edit those videos for social media. I think the best thing to do is really kind of step back and make sure you're watching your final product and you know what your goal is. Remember, we talked about like the first question on the presentation was, why do we use video, right? Thinking about, are you telling a story? Are you documenting? Are you educating, persuade, or communicating? Because that's going to change how you're presenting your video or your image, right? So I would kind of think about each post every time you make something. Really think about, okay, what is my goal of this? Am I just creating content or am I communicating something or educating? Because all that's going to matter. I think text in your videos is really helpful. I think sometimes people will use the text, the copy block, that will go with a post as opposed to putting it in the video itself. I think sometimes that can be a useful thing to help with. But I'm a really big fan of the Adobe Creative Cloud. So using Adobe Premiere, and Adobe has some really, really great free online tutorials on their website on how to use the software. And it's pretty industry standard, and that might be something that your organization is already paying for the Creative Cloud and you could get access to it. And for me, I'm way less distracted when I'm using Adobe Premiere as opposed to when me trying to edit a TikTok video is hilarious. Even though I've been a professional video editor for like over 20 years, it's just overwhelming by the choices and the options. So I think going back and figuring out your post first and what's the point of it. Does that kind of answer your question, Dylan?
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of like overlaying voiceover B-roll and those sort of things, if you have any tips on kind of putting all that together, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back, like if you're using Adobe Premiere, you can use VoiceOver and, you can import graphics from Photoshop. It's a really great way to reach your audience. And I think sometimes duration is really important to consider. So like if you want to make a quick reel that you're putting out to document the progress of your project, thinking about, well, how long does that really need to be? Is 30 seconds long enough? Because sometimes you could spend a long time like creating a really polished piece and it might not get as many views. Does that make sense? So I think when you're recording audio, you can use your cell phone. Your cell phone does a pretty good job, but making sure you're in a quiet space to record it. Writing a script is great and reading your script. And sometimes you have to record that 5 or 6 times until you get it right. So don't be afraid if you're doing voiceover to just do it as many times. And I think on my PowerPoint, there's some really great websites to get free play music. I think a lot of the social media, like YouTube, has their own thing too. Sometimes adding background music so it's not distracting. But when I do voiceover and add music to my projects, what I'll do is I'll put those elements in first, and then I'll cut to the beat or cut to the story of the text, if that makes sense, of like the story narration. So if if it's starting and saying, today we're at the site, then I'm going to start with a wide shot of the site. We talked to so-and-so, then I might want to show a picture of so-and-so doing their job. So sometimes I think it's important to like write your story first, record the audio, and then your video will just follow what your narration is saying, if that makes sense. So they're connected. It kind of goes back to that whole idea of A-roll and B-roll. While sometimes you capture the B-roll first, and then you want to put the A-roll together, once you have your story and your A-roll or your interview portion like laid down, it makes the B-roll and the visuals so much easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan, I'll add to what Andy was saying about Adobe. They have a condensed version of Premiere. It's called Rush, I think it
Yes.
is.
Mhm.
And I actually have an app on my phone with this Adobe Rush, and it's just a simplified, it's a little bit easier and quicker to use. It doesn't have as much of a full scale editing suite as Premiere, but if you're doing quick stuff, that might be the easiest thing. And there's lots of YouTube tutorials on Rush.
Mhm. Yeah, Adobe they do a really great job with educational components of all of their products. I will say, as an educator, I really appreciate the tutorials that they provide, not Joe Schmo on YouTube.
Yep. That's all I can think of. Any other questions anybody has? Great information. Thanks, Andy, so much for
Yeah, and
sharing. And maybe we could have another one of these in a couple of months, or just progress general. But like you said, we're here to help. Reach out and anybody has any specific questions or projects or anything they want to know, we'll try to help. But it's exciting time here. We're happy to see all these projects get started.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, I hope everyone has a great rest of your Friday.
We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Thank you.